so these are the different behavioral patterns that we are going to assess in an interview process. So my first recommendation would be to look at the job description, right? The job description is going to give you a lot of hints as to what they're actually looking for in the role. That's kind of why they have the job description, right? They want to see if you're a good fit. So start with the job description and review the company culture. For example, because I work at Amazon, I'll give you an Amazon example. Reviewing the company culture means reviewing Amazon's 14 leadership principles. Now, you can assume because those leadership principles are splashed all across their website, that that's going to be something that's pretty important for their interview. Usually what companies do, big companies, also mid-sized ones, what they'll do is they will post their company culture, things that to do related to their company culture on their website. So the first thing you want to do is read the job description and see what they're looking for. They might say like looking for a team player, something very general like that. So that just means they're going to ask you some questions about how you work on a team, how you handle conflict. Whereas in the case of Amazon with those 14 leadership principles, you can pretty much assume that they're going to ask you some question that has to do with each and every one of them because of how important those are. So they might ask you a question about how you earn trust on your team or with your management. They might ask you a question about a time when you picked up a project that wasn't technically yours, but that you thought would benefit your team. So things like that will kind of give you a gist of what behavioral questions they'll ask you at the role that you're applying to. Then there's some general patterns that you can notice, right? So it doesn't matter what company you're applying to, these things will likely be assessed everywhere just because they're important things to have, important qualities to reflect. So you have communication, work ethic, motivation. You can assume that in every job, they want good communication skills, and in every job, they want a good work ethic. So again, you can assume that you will be answering those types of questions, so you can just best prepare for them once, and that would translate to all your interviews. Then there's two different ones, the first one for individual contributors and the second for engineering managers. You can assume that those are going to be different. Individual contributor roles will focus more on you, how you function on your team as an IC. So they'll have icebreaker questions like, tell me about yourself, why do you want to apply to this role? They'll have like timelines, conflicts, strengths and weaknesses. So tell me about a time when you had to perform under a very strict deadline. How did you manage? How did you prioritize? So that's an IC question that you might get. For all of you who are going into management level roles, they're going to ask you a lot of questions about, hiring, firing, promoting. How do you develop your employees? Any type of motivation or planning. So all of these things are going to come into play if you're applying for a management role. Then you have categories of questions, like I talked about those 3 different categories. It's kind of like in your technical interviews, right? You have problem solving, you have system design, so there's different kind of aspects of the technical. Similarly, you have different aspects of the behavioral. The first one is the icebreaker, which is what I mentioned earlier. The icebreaker is like a tell me about yourself type question. So you might enter the interview process and they'll ask you to tell them about yourself. How did you get to this point in your career? That's just another example. Then there's the situational questions, which are the most popular in behavioral interviews. So situational questions is like, tell me about a time when, or tell me about a project that you had, etc. So one of the ones that I mentioned earlier was like, tell me about a time you had to resolve conflict on your team, or you had a conflict with a team member. That would be a situational question. And then the third is philosophy questions. So for those questions, the interviewer is trying to understand what your thought process is behind how you function at work, essentially. So what they're looking for there is some kind of introspection. So why are you interested in this role? They pretty much ask you that for every company. Why are you interested in the company? Describe your leadership style. So just kind of more thought into how you function, what you do. So this will help you kind of develop a strategy around all of these things. You can match patterns based on what you've seen, based on the companies that you're applying to. And then from there, you can build a response. And you can build responses that, work at multiple different places, so you don't have to put in an excessive amount of work every time you interview. If you have all of those strategies, you have all of those answers written out, then you can just tailor them to different interview styles, and you should be good to go. So those patterns might help you fit some of the questions that you receive into specific categories that'll help you prepare.
Want to become a software engineer at Google? You can, like thousands of our students. You just need to learn from those who've already cleared FANG interviews. At Interview Kickstart, our interview prep courses are developed and taught live by 150 plus instructors from Tier 1 companies like Google and Facebook. Our courses are tailored to help you crack software engineering domain interviews, including back-end, full stack, machine learning, embedded systems, data science, and more. To learn more, book your free webinar slot today